She woke before the call to prayer, when the palace still held its breath. The lamps along the tiled corridor burned low, their flames wavering like nervous witnesses. Somewhere beyond the latticed windows, the Bosphorus shifted in the dark, carrying secrets between continents. She pressed her palm to the cool marble and steadied herself. In the harem of Murad IV, silence was never empty. It was crowded with listening walls, hidden eyes, and the memory of women who had vanished without farewell. Tonight, desire would walk hand in hand with terror. Tonight, a single glance from the Sultan could elevate a girl into silk and gold or condemn her to oblivion. She inhaled the scent of rosewater and smoke, knowing that what awaited her behind the guarded doors was not intimacy, but power stripped bare, sharp enough to draw blood. By morning, Topkapi Palace shimmered like a jeweled cage above the city. The courtyards echoed with footsteps disciplined into obedience, while behind carved doors the harem stirred awake, layered with whispers and restrained breath. Aileen moved carefully through this world, her silk slippers soundless against the stone. She had entered the harem 2 years earlier, taken from the Black Sea coast, her name reshaped, her past folded away like discarded cloth. What remained was training, observation, and the slow awakening to the truth no tutor spoke aloud. The harem was not a sanctuary, but a battlefield governed by beauty, patience, and fear. Murad IV ruled with a severity that stained every corner of the palace. His temper was legend, his punishments swift and absolute. Even the eunuchs lowered their eyes when his name was spoken. For the concubines, his presence was a force felt even in absence. It shaped routines, dictated rivalries, hardened ambitions. Nights of summons were anticipated with equal parts longing and dread. To be chosen was to be seen. To be seen was to be vulnerable. Aileen learned quickly that survival depended less on allure than on awareness. She watched who received new jewels, who was given silence instead. She noted how alliances formed over shared tasks, how envy traveled faster than favor. In the baths, steam loosened tongues and stories slipped free, of girls who rose too quickly, of others who trusted the wrong confidant. Aileen listened, memorizing patterns. Power here was not seized, it was waited for, coaxed, endured. The Valide Sultan's shadow stretched long across the harem. Her approval could shield a woman from the Sultan's wrath or expose her to it. Aileen once felt that gaze linger, assessing rather than judging. It unsettled her more than indifference would have. From that moment, she understood that every movement was a statement, every stillness a choice. When Murad IV first summoned her, the message arrived without ornament. Her heart did not race, it slowed. She bathed, dressed, and followed the eunuch through corridors she had only imagined. The chamber was austere for a ruler of such appetite, its luxury restrained, controlled. The Sultan regarded her with eyes that revealed nothing. In that instant, Aileen grasped the cruel clarity of the harem's truth. Desire here was inseparable from domination. She offered neither resistance nor eagerness, only composure. Whether it would save her, she did not yet know. After that night, attention sharpened around her. Other women measured her, recalculated their positions. Some approached with tentative kindness, others with veiled hostility. Aileen accepted neither fully. She sensed that the harem was shifting, responding to currents beyond its walls. Rebellions, purges, executions whispered through servants' mouths. Murad's need for control bled into his private world, tightening its grip. As weeks passed, Aileen felt herself drawn deeper into the palace's hidden mechanisms. She learned which nights the Sultan drank, which silences preceded violence, which smiles concealed warnings. Yet with each lesson came a realization that chilled her resolve. Knowledge protected her only until it threatened someone else, and in Murad IV's harem, threats were erased, not forgiven. The rhythm of the harem changed after Aileen's summons, subtle yet unmistakable, like a shift in air before a storm. Doors that once opened freely now paused before yielding. Conversations lowered when she entered, then resumed with careful neutrality. She felt herself becoming a point of reference, a silent measure against which others assessed their own fortunes. In Topkapi, attention was never evenly distributed. It gathered, condensed, and then struck. Murad IV's visits became irregular, driven by moods shaped far beyond the palace walls. On some nights he arrived sharp with restraint, his presence controlled to the edge of violence. On others, exhaustion softened him, and he spoke of the city as if it were an unruly creature he alone could discipline. Aileen listened, answering only when invited. She understood that the Sultan did not seek counsel. He sought confirmation that order still obeyed him, even here, in the most private domain of his rule. The Valide Sultan began to test her. Aileen was summoned for small tasks that carried hidden meaning, delivering messages, accompanying favored women, standing quietly during conversations not meant for her ears. Each assignment was a measure of discretion. She passed them by speaking little and observing much. The older woman's gaze grew more deliberate, weighing usefulness against threat. In the harem, maternal authority was as dangerous as imperial command. Rivalries intensified. One concubine, Faride, approached Aileen with practiced warmth, offering guidance wrapped in sympathy. Her generosity was too precise. Aileen accepted the words but not the intent, sensing the trap beneath the kindness. Another woman, younger and newly arrived, watched her with open resentment, her ambition untempered by fear. Aileen recognized herself in that gaze and felt a quiet warning stir. Youth burned brightly here, but it burned fast. Outside the harem, Murad's campaigns hardened his temper. Executions multiplied, and fear seeped through the palace like cold. Servants whispered of drownings, of nights when the Bosphorus swallowed men without sound. That brutality echoed inward. The Sultan's need for control intensified, and the harem responded by tightening its own hierarchies. Rules were enforced with renewed severity. Mistakes were no longer corrected, they were punished. One evening, Aileen was summoned unexpectedly to the Valide Sultan's chambers. The meeting was brief and measured. She was asked what she desired. The question unsettled her more than any threat. Desire, spoken aloud, became liability. Aileen answered with humility, framing her ambitions as service, her loyalty as survival. The Valide Sultan studied her for a long moment, then dismissed her without comment. Aileen left knowing that she had been marked, not favored, not condemned, but placed. Murad returned from a campaign changed, his restraint thinned by victory and loss alike. His summons grew more frequent, his expectations less predictable. At times he demanded silence, at others presence. Aileen learned to read the space around him, to anticipate shifts in temper by the cadence of his steps, the stillness of his hands. She understood that intimacy here was not mutual, it was exposure. Yet each night she survived tightened her position, anchoring her deeper within the palace's dangerous equilibrium. News arrived of a failed conspiracy within the court. Names were erased overnight. The harem responded with calculated calm, but Aileen felt the tremor beneath it. Power was contracting, growing suspicious of all proximity.
She realized then that survival would soon require more than discretion. It would require choice between alignment and withdrawal, between visibility and disappearance. As winter deepened, the Bosphorus darkened early and the palace closed in on itself. Aileen stood one night at a narrow window, watching the water swallow the last light. She understood that the harem was no longer merely a place she endured. It had become a system she influenced, however quietly. And systems, she knew, demanded loyalty in moments of crisis. When that moment arrived, she would not be allowed to remain silent.
The crisis announced itself without proclamation. It crept through the harem disguised as routine, carried in the pauses between commands and the sudden reassignment of trusted hands. Aileen noticed the changes first in the guards. Rotations tightened, routes altered, faces she knew replaced by others who watched too carefully. The Valid Sultan withdrew from public presence, her messages delivered through intermediaries whose loyalty was unquestioned and whose eyes revealed nothing. The palace was bracing itself, folding inward like a blade. Murad IV's temper grew mercurial. When he summoned Aileen now, it was often after midnight, when the city lay hushed and the Bosphorus reflected only darkness. He spoke of treachery as if it were a disease carried on breath. He demanded certainty in a world that offered none. Aileen learned to ground him not with reassurance, but with order. Small rituals of stillness, predictable responses, the illusion of control mirrored back to him. It was dangerous work. To soothe a ruler who feared betrayal was to step close to the source of violence. Feride's fall came swiftly. One morning her cushions were removed, her jewelry reclaimed, her name avoided. No explanation followed. The harem absorbed the loss with practiced indifference, yet Aileen felt the recalibration ripple outward. Vacuums were invitations. Younger women advanced too eagerly, older ones retreated into obscurity. Aileen held her position, resisting the impulse to fill the silence. She had learned that in Murad's court, movement invited scrutiny. The Valid Sultan summoned her again, this time at dusk. The chamber smelled of incense and old paper. She spoke plainly. A threat had been identified, close and unresolved. Loyalty would be tested not through confession, but through conduct. Aileen was instructed to observe, to remember, to report only what could not be ignored. It was an assignment that offered no protection. To carry knowledge was to carry risk, yet refusal was unthinkable. Aileen accepted, understanding that neutrality was no longer available to her. What she learned unsettled her. A web of quiet sympathies linked servants, officials, and one favored woman whose ambition outpaced her caution. The evidence was incomplete, suggestive rather than decisive. Aileen hesitated, weighing consequence against certainty. In Murad's reign, accusation did not require proof, it required opportunity. She delayed, hoping the pattern would clarify. Delay itself became a choice. When Murad discovered fragments of the same intelligence through harsher channels, his response was immediate and absolute. Arrests followed, interrogations echoed through the night. The harem sealed itself behind composure, while fear tightened every breath. Aileen was summoned and questioned, not accused, but measured. Murad asked what she had seen. The room seemed to narrow as she answered with precision, offering only what she could stand behind. He listened, unreadable. When he dismissed her, she did not know whether she had survived or merely postponed judgment. The aftermath was devastating. Names disappeared from conversation. Rooms were emptied. The Bosphorus carried away what the palace no longer wished to hold. Aileen moved through the days as if across thin ice, aware that endurance had sharpened her edges. She had influenced outcomes not through desire, but through restraint. It was a colder power than she had imagined, and it left no room for innocence. In the quiet that followed, Murad's attention returned to her with an intensity that unsettled her more than neglect had. He spoke less of enemies and more of legacy.
He asked what remained when fear accomplished its purpose. Aileen understood then that the final test was approaching, not of loyalty to a person, but to a future he could no longer fully command. The harem, once a place of waiting, had become a crucible. Whatever emerged from it would not be untouched.
The reckoning unfolded not in spectacle, but in quiet resolution. Murad IV did not announce decisions when he reached them, he embodied them. His movements slowed, his voice steadied, and the violence that had once burst outward now compressed inward, becoming colder, more deliberate. Aileen sensed the shift before it was spoken. The harem, too, felt it. Less panic, more rigidity, as if the palace itself had accepted a final shape. Murad summoned her at dawn, an hour he rarely claimed. Light filtered through the lattice, thin and pale, revealing lines of fatigue etched deeper into his face than before. He spoke of order, of the burden of rule, of the futility of fear when it outlived its usefulness. Aileen listened, understanding that this was not confession, but transition. When he asked her what she believed would remain of him, she answered carefully. Not conquest, she said, not terror. What endured were structures, habits set into place, systems trained to continue without constant force. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded, as if confirming a thought already formed. That evening, the Valide Sultan's decision arrived through action rather than decree. Aileen was granted permission to leave the inner harem, assigned stewardship of an estate beyond the city, a position framed as honor and trust. It was neither exile nor elevation. It was survival with distance. Aileen accepted without visible reaction. She understood the balance struck. She had become too knowledgeable to remain, too loyal to destroy. Removal was the cleanest resolution. Her departure was quiet. No women gathered to mark it. No rivals spoke her name. She passed through the gates as she had entered the harem years before, composed, observant, carrying more within her than she displayed. From the terrace above the water, she paused once, watching the Bosphorus catch the morning light. It had carried away many things. It would carry on without her. In the months that followed, Murad's reign hardened into legend. Order was enforced. Excess was punished. The palace ran with disciplined efficiency, its inner workings stripped of softness. Those who remained in the harem adapted, as women always did, learning new limits, new silences. Aileen's absence was absorbed without comment. The system endured. From her estate, she watched the empire indirectly, through reports and echoes. She felt no longing to return. Power, she had learned, demanded too much presence. Distance offered clarity. She lived carefully, deliberately, her influence narrowed but intact. She had survived proximity to absolute authority, and that survival reshaped her understanding of desire forever. It was never about passion, it was about proximity to consequence. Murad IV died young, as men like him often did. History would remember his severity, his attempts to discipline chaos through force. It would not remember the women who absorbed that force, redirected it, softened its edges enough for the empire to function. Their names would vanish, but their imprint would remain, invisible and essential. Aileen lived long enough to know that endurance was its own quiet victory. She carried the harem with her, not as trauma, but as knowledge, and knowledge once earned could not be taken away.